Hi, everyone, and welcome to Bits of Code, the show breaking down the topics and challenges of coding a competitive bot that you can make at home. My name's Stephen Brown. I've shown you a few tutorials so far on this show. Today's going to be a little bit different. We're going to talk to some bot authors, the creators of a bot named Micro Machine that has been very successful in the ProBots tournament and also successful in the SC2 AI tournament. So the two bot authors are Unusual and Raph. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So
Years for me, I think.
Wow.
Maybe a year or a year and a half for me, something like that.
Okay, and how do you manage two guys writing one bot? I imagine, I work as a programmer all day with a team of guys, and we don't like to really walk near each other's code. So how do you do it, creating a bot that's successful with two guys?
Yeah, we separated the task into two categories, which are the macro and the micro. So we don't often play on each other's code, but sometimes but we can still develop our things separately and merge them together, and we don't have often problems.
Yeah, we really do get along. So if I have to modify his code or something, he just tells me what I need to know, and the same thing on the other way. So it just really goes well for us.
So who's macro and who's micro?
I'm the macro, he's the micro.
Okay, does that come from experience from playing, or was it kind of like obviously it was Micro Machine that had very good micro to begin with, and then kind of evolved this pretty incredible macro game. Is that out of necessity that you made it work that way?
Yeah, I named the bot Micro Machine because when I first started, I just wanted to use the command center bot that was already available and just add some micro to it and see how it does. And then I had a lot of fun developing the bot, so I asked Alexi to help me, and it was easier for us to separate into two tasks. So he took the macro side.
In terms of actual game knowledge, I have a lot more than he does, for the simple reason that I actually played the game for real. I think he only did the campaign.
Yeah, the campaign like 10 years ago.
And while I tried to play ranked a lot and reach between Diamond and Master, so it was pretty good. At least decent, I guess.
Well, that's fair enough. I tend to only play the single player anyway. I don't really like getting on the competitive ladder and being beaten and having to deal with that. And it's a little bit easier when you can build a bot and it acts perfectly and makes the right decisions every time and has the perfect timing and those kinds of things.
Yeah, everything we develop, it just do it game after game. It's not like if I'm playing and I make a mistake, okay, next game I correct it, but I do a different mistake.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating, and the bot just does what we want him to do.
Yeah, since I started making the bot, I can't play StarCraft anymore because I make mistakes that my bot would never do. We make other weird mistakes, but
we can work on them.
Yeah, we can fix that.
Do you feel like making the bot has influenced any gameplay that with the little gameplay that you have now?
For me, it doesn't really change anything because I know what the bot does. I cannot really do like the micro part. I cannot do.
And 90,000 APM, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So you said you built the bot on Command Center. Could you tell us a little bit about that choice, and did you have a history in C++ programming or with making brood war bots or anything like that?
Yeah, I learned C++ at school in Cégep, that we call here. It's like a pre-university. And then when I started working on the bot, there was only the C++ API that was available. The Python API came out a few months after that. So I didn't really have a choice unless I wanted to code the Python API myself, but I didn't. So I used, and it was pretty advanced, the command center already, so I could just start doing the micro right away and not like tell workers to create buildings at this exact position. It was already put into the bot, so I could not lose time with that. It was a good start.
Like Command Center does a lot of things for you. That's great. There's a few bugs in it that we lost a lot of time on. But if anyone wants to start with it, just contact us and we'll tell you what the bugs are and how to fix them. But yeah, in general, it's a really good start if you want to make a C++ bot. Most of things are already done. You only have to do the micro and the macro.
I still think that the Python API is more advanced, and there's a lot of features that aren't already there in C++. So if beginners want to go try to build their bot, I think they should go with the Python API.
Yeah.
But if you love C++ or just want to learn it, it's still a good choice.
So I think the key thing about Command Center is it was actually used for Brood War bots to begin with, right? And then it was adapted to StarCraft 2 when the API came out. So it sounds like potentially in that conversion across, maybe not everything was fully functioning, or maybe it didn't quite have as much support from the developers for the StarCraft 2 side of things versus Brood War.
Yeah.
Is that what you found?
Yeah, probably that some modification had to be made to make it work with StarCraft and StarCraft 2, and the author just didn't want to lose too much time onto fixing all the small bugs that there was. But we still see some Brood War code that we just scrap when we see it, because we didn't even check all of the Command Center code base, because it's pretty huge. So when we find some code that we didn't see yet, and we find some Brood War code, we just remove it, because it's useless, because we won't ever switch our code to make support for Brood War API.
Are you contributing any code back into Command Center, or any fixes that you find, or anything like that?
Our branch is so diverged that we can't.
Fair enough.
We're way too far apart. Like, we do a fix, but then it's on top of 16 layers of changes. So
Sure, that's fair. So looking at your bot, I mean, watching it as it plays through the various tournaments, it seems to me it's a pretty solid, go straight into a proxy racks first up. That's sort of what it's known for. That seems like your placement of the proxy. It seems like none of the other bots really scout that or really expect it or even have an answer for it. Is that chosen specifically for that purpose?
Yeah, the proxy location is random at the moment. There's still sharpened edge. I think that bot is the only one that try to scout and see if our bot makes a proxy near its base. So sometimes it will just stop the build of the barracks, but when it happens, we build a new barracks in our base and continue like a normal game. But yeah, the proxy build is not old. It's from the last ProBus tournament around I think 3 months ago.
Yeah.
So it's pretty recent in terms of bot age.
Yeah. Before that, we used to just go Reaper, Banshee, and try to just crush them with that.
It looks like a similar build, except the barracks and the factory were in your main rather than at the proxy. Is that right?
Well, we do it proxy, and then sometimes we go battle cruiser now.
So what's your, what are the decision-making points for your bot? I know at the start of the game, it looks like it reports in, it obviously knows the enemy. So it's, I guess, the feed in the enemy name, right? So you can just say, I've played against you before. How are you storing that information? Are you sending that information back to a server, or is it just on the machine where the games are running that it knows I've played this before and this is the strategy I used and I won or lost?
Yeah, exactly. We store it in local into the servers of the ladders, and it chooses really just based on the success rate of the strategies. I think we have like 4 or 5 strategies that we can use, and when a strategy doesn't work, we try a new one, and then we accumulate statistics and choose the one that has the best win percentage.
So in a sense, it's a very basic version of machine learning, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Very basic.
as you, is that also map dependent? Or it seems like on some maps it seems to do better to have the proxy racks, and on others it doesn't do as well. Do you choose a build based on the map, and the opponent, or just based on the opponent?
It's only based on the opponent. Right now, we have absolutely no understanding of the map per se.
Right.
Detect the ramp and stuff, but we don't choose any build or any unit based on the map itself.
Mm-hmm. Is that because with Command Center, does it give you all the base locations and all the minerals and spawn locations, so you can just program around that and just say, expand into natural, expand to third, and so on?
Yeah, it's pretty general. So pretty much every base works. Every maps works for detecting all the base. We still had to make some modification to Command Center's base detection, because like on this map, there's some mineral walls that detects new bases, but they are not existing. Like it's only few minerals. So we just we fixed that, so it detects the bases correctly. But
on some cases, on some specific maps, when the bases were too close, Command Center would detect it as one base, or sometimes even 3 bases. So there was definitely some fixes to be done, but like 90% of the maps, Command Center understood properly right off the bat. So that's really good.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing I found when building a bot is, trying to customize it for every map is very difficult, and trying to build those automatic detectors is very difficult, because you get 2 bases that are very close together, or you get a small cluster, and which side of that do you put your Command Center, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we really try to have our bot completely map non-dependent. So if something works on one map, it will work in another.
Right. So every time there's new maps released, and each season, you don't really have to worry about adapting too much.
Well, we do test it to make sure it still works, everything works fine. But in general, we just test it and it's fine. We don't do any change.
Right. So you can see here on the screen, you've got like these little fireworks of clicks going around all of the units. Sometimes they just look incredible, like thousands of clicks per second, it looks like. Look at the little bouncing arrows and all that. So are you controlling, is each unit, there's a thing called game steps, right? So what is it? 24 game steps per second or whatever, something like that.
22.4.
0.4, yeah. So are you acting in every game step, or are you is every unit taking an action in every game step?
Yeah, C++ is performant enough so we can afford to take decision every game steps, and we also loop through all our units to decide what action they should take based on what they see around them. So usually every frame, every unit get an action, unless it's an action that is very similar to the previous one. So we can reduce a little bit the number of action, because there's a bug in the game that after too many action has been sent to the game, the action will be executed in a random order, and the units just do.
They just run around everywhere and
they don't respond to the action we send them.
So to avoid this problem, what we do with the workers is the minimum actions possible. Like basically each worker gets 1 order ever, unless it's building something.
And how do you choose the workers for building? Is it based on which one is closest, or with mine it's always what's not mining gas, and then which one's closest, and so on?
It's the closest worker that is not currently holding anything and is not working on the gas.
and it also needs to add a safe path to the location where it wants to build.
So let's say there's a unit attacking our main or something. We won't pick one of those workers, but we might pick one in their second or third to build, I don't know what.
So how are you determining that safe path? Are you drawing a pathable line on the map and then saying if there's an enemy within a certain range of that?
Not really, not exactly. At every frame, we check every enemy unit, and every unit, based on their DPS and their movement speed, they're gonna generate influence onto a grid map, and then the workers will do pathfinding onto that map to see if it encounters influence. If it does, it's considered as a path that is not safe. So we're gonna check with another worker.
Yeah.
So that was the image that you sent me, wasn't it? The influence map.
Yeah. Basically, you can see it as a big circle around each enemy unit. That's just unpathable path for the workers. So if the worker tries to go through any of it, it's just gonna say unsafe.
And
can you explain that here? Like looking at the screen, what do you?
Yeah. Also, the army units are using it. So like there we see on the screen. The queen that is in the center of the big yellow circle is generating some influence based on its range, and the double square are because the queen can attack on the air and on the ground, and a bit farther we can see that they are single square on the tiles. This is because the queen has a largest longer range.
For air attacks.
Yeah, exactly.
So the small squares are air and the large squares are ground. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right.
And then the Reaper, it do a pathfinding to find a place to go to like dodge the influence and go to the target, which are the workers in the mineral line.
Okay, so when you have multiple enemy units on the screen, you'll see these influence maps overlapping. So
yeah, they combine together.
Be able to say, right. So then, if there's a path, you might have to walk all the way around multiple influence, or individual enemy unit maps to get to your destination.
Yeah, and this operation can be quite intensive for the CPU. So in C++, it's all right because it's performant, but on Python it's a bit harder. So it's a strategy that can't really be used on Python unless you convert your code to C++ and from Python call your C++ code. So that's still possible, but it's a bit more complicated.
Sure. I mean, I'm sure things like this could be potentially implemented with Python, but you'd have to build it from the ground up, really, and you'd have to build in all those values about their attack distances and those kinds of things, right? And
well, that's what we had to do. But the real issue is that if you're doing Python is quite slow. If you're doing just bots game, it can be fine. But if you try to play against a player, your bot is going to take an action every 2 seconds.
Yeah, I have noticed when building a Python bot, the more loops you have, the slower and slower it gets. So you really have to spend a lot of time refining your loops, making sure you loop through all the units once and maybe store some calculated values and then do your decision making based on those calculated values instead of looping repeatedly, like give me all the Reapers and then it has to loop through, and then give me all the Queens and it has to loop through. You just do it once, build a list of Reapers, build a list of Queens, and it makes it a lot quicker. But of course, adding all these attack ranges and that kind of thing would, multiply the amount of work that you're doing for each unit, even if you've only got one loop, I guess.
Yeah, and if you have a lot more action to be done or things to consider, every loop is slower. So like our bot does combat simulation, so it's something else other than the pathfinding to consider. So it takes more time. So we really need to make our code performant so it can run every frame and not lag.
Right.
We make our bot in a way that we want it to be also performant against players.
So is that how you test it? Do you tend to play against it a lot just to see how it's working, or how would you test something like this? Do you play it against real bots, against yourself, against the in-game AI?
Most of
it's difficult.
Most of the time we play against the in-game AI because it's the fastest way of testing. But some specific scenarios are only possible when we play against them, against our bot. But if I want to test like general strategies, I'll often test against additional pylons, which is another good bot. It's a ProDOS one. I would like to test against other bots, but they are not downloadable, so I can't test locally against them. So usually I'll test just a little bit what I implemented just to see it doesn't crash, and then I upload it to the AI Arena ladder and see how well it performs.
I've personally played against our bot quite a few times. It never ends well, but I get to test what I want to test. Yeah. I've also had a few people I know play against it that are like top diamond or GM. Doesn't always end the way they want it to, but give some good feedback. Live testing is always good, so yeah.
So I imagine when you're developing the bot, you're playing it against another bot. You watch the replay of that game. This is where we lost. This is where we could have done something better. So then you're improving the bot, and then you play it out against an in-game AI and just hope that maybe the build order that they did would have lined up. So you're not really reacting to what the in-game AI does, but you're just watching that it makes the right decisions in the right order.
Yeah, we're watching the replays that are played on the ladders, but when we test in game, we see the live game and all the debug displays. It help us to understand what's wrong with our bot. But yeah, we often download replays where our bot loses on league games, and then we find the most important point of the game where our bot did something wrong, and then we create a new issue that we'll list on our GitHub issues, and it accumulates, and we have a never-ending list of issues.
Yeah, I imagine it will get quite tricky because every time you make an improvement, the other bot makers are making an improvement, and then by the time you implement yours, they might be doing a completely different strategy, and then you've got to keep adjusting, right?
It's usually just in small increments, so we can still understand what's going on and just improve one thing at a time, and we stay on top still.
And we're not trying to actually counter the opponent. We're trying just to improve what we're already doing and just win from it.
So you're just saying this is a weakness, fix the weakness, rather than this bot works this way, and so let's exploit
fix our weakness instead of abusing the other bot's weakness.
Right. So it seems like even though that's your strategy, it works quite well. It seems like early on, the advantage of being able to control or give an action to every single unit, it seems like you can control each unit independently of all the other units, so they don't tend to work so much on the screen. We can see they're working together at the moment, but early game they seem to all operate independently. You have Reapers running around everywhere. Looks like at one point I saw a Reaper look like he was just clearing the map, looking to see if there are any expansions, any enemy expansions or proxies. And then each unit seems to sort of operate independently and make its own decisions, which seems to be confusing for the other bots. And it also seems to attack early, which one of the weaknesses, I guess, of most bots seems to be that it has a fixed build order to a point. And so I've seen your Reaper go in, picking off workers, and there might be an enemy Marine standing by doing nothing, I guess. So is that something you kind of, you found that sweet spot and you kind of leave it there, or did you build specifically for that kind of scenario?
Well, the main point of our bot is that it applies constant pressure, so it prevents the enemy from expanding. So we use
by taking all the bases.
That's one of our strategies.
But yeah, I guess
it worked in this game.
Yeah, in this against Gensibot, it works very well because it doesn't expand fast enough, so it kind of defend, and it doesn't see what we're doing in our base because all our army units are just next to his base. So we just take the other base while our army units are waiting in front of his base. But I guess if we were doing more army units instead of taking bases, maybe we would have a chance to pierce its defense. But it's not something that our bot can do right now. It just check how the amount of resources it has, and if it can build a new base, it will. So it never waits to like create more units or stop creating units to create a new base. It just always build whatever it can.
Yeah, basically our bot is economy based in a way. We max out every building that can produce units, and then once that's done, if we have 400 left, we expand. There's no question about it. We're expanding. If there's no expand left, well, of course, we're just going to build more stuff to expand, to make more units. But yeah, we just always max every building.
So how do you balance upgrades versus units versus everything else? Like I have noticed that when you see more air units, sometimes it'll build more air units. I haven't seen a lot of, it doesn't seem to build a lot of Marines. It seems to sort of go straight to Cyclones fairly early and then up to BCs and so on from there. How is it choosing, okay, I've got to build another barracks, or I've got to build another factory, or I've got to build, a Cyclone, or like, what's the decision-making process there?
Yeah, we have some predefined rules that our bot will make the first barrack, and then it will make a factory, and then it will make a starport, and whatever happens in the game, it will try to do these buildings at this order. But we also have a limited list of units that our bot can micro, so it's the unit that will choose to make whatever the enemy is doing. But since some of the units that we make are not always useful, like Vikings only attack air when they are flying, so if the opponent doesn't make any air unit, we don't really have a reason to make them. So we just wait to see if the opponent can produce air units, and if it does, then we'll start making Vikings.
Yeah, and once we have the majority of the air, we stop producing Vikings. We'll focus on other types of units. And as you can see right now, if we have too much Vikings, we just drop some and try to do something with them.
It seems to work quite well. I saw just before you had the Marines charging a tank. Did you have to sort of program that in? Because I know a lot of bots have trouble when they've got a tank. The Marines will sit back and they won't sort of push in to get close range.
Well, it's at this point of the game, it's starting to be complicated to understand what our bot is doing exactly. It's hard to test these scenarios. Mm-hmm. So if our Marines charge a tank, it's probably because the combat simulation told them that they could win that fight.
Right.
But it might also be a bug, so we never know.
A good bug. So you said combat simulation. Is that something that is built into Command Center, or is that something that you guys put together?
Yeah, no, it was not in Command Center. We have two types of combat simulation. We have one that is very old that I made not long after I started to develop the bot, which is to find a value of power level of each unit and then compare it to the enemy power values. But we also added a combat simulation that is based on attacks, units that attacks enemy units, and then they get attacked, and it simulates the combat until one of the two armies is dead, and check to see which one is the winner. And this combat simulation was made by some guy named Voxel, and thankfully he gave it to us. So we're using it, and we made some small adjustment to it, but mainly it's a library that we were able to use as it is.
Like the combat submission is pretty good, but it doesn't consider the positioning of the units, doesn't consider the splash damage, doesn't consider the micro. So it's a good result that helps, but you cannot like only base yourself on it, because then you might take some very unfavorable fights without realizing it.
Sure. So I've seen the combat simulator, for example, in the arcade. There are those sorts of, you add a bunch of units and move them against each other and see what wins. Is that effectively what it is? And then it's outputting some sort of data at the end saying these ones work, these ones didn't work.
It's the same idea, but consider that every unit always have infinite range. Basically, they can always hit each other's.
Right. So you just put a number, 5 Marine to 1 tank. This is what the outcome's going to be.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So one of the things I notice, or that I've sort of built in, that seems like you guys are doing, is some sort of automated mechanics. So you see that a supply depot will always raise when an enemy unit is within a certain distance, and then always lower again when they go out of distance, which is great, because I think that's a really useful way to not have to deal with lowering them just so units can move through. Just keep them lowered and then move them up when you need a wall, right? So that makes it a lot easier to manage. Are you automatically dropping mules as soon as you've got enough energy, or do you hold off a little bit of energy for a scan?
Okay. For a starter, the walls, it's just coded in the way that's the easiest and simplest. If there's an enemy close to the supply depot, we raise it. There's no question about it. Unless it's like an overlord or something that's air, right? That tends to bug some bots. Like they see, oh, there's a wall suddenly, and they take some weird padding, especially when it's in the ramp. Like there's a wall suddenly, so they're like, oh, let's back. And then the wall drops, so they're like, oh, let's charge in. So they just get stuck in the ramp for some reason.
Yeah.
For the mules, we always drop them as soon as we have 50, except if we know we need to keep some energy for scans, which we're not using right now.
Yeah.
But this is coming in very, very soon version, so don't try and exploit it, guys.
So I noticed that the bot will say, I think, what's it? You like the dark arts of invisibility too, or something like that. Is that just chat, or does that actually help you guys to say, oh, okay, it knows that there's a cloaked unit, and therefore it's making a decision at that point that maybe it will need a scan?
Yeah, I made some chat commands just to make it more interesting to watch, but it also helps us to debug, just to make sure that our bot still detects some things. But it's also fun to see a bot that can talk to its opponent.
Yeah. But it doesn't seem to say GLHF or GG or anything like that.
What? Can you repeat?
Sorry?
Your bot doesn't seem to say good luck, have fun, or GG.
No, we know we're gonna win. It's not gonna be fun.
So it's just have fun. There's no good luck.
No.
Fair enough.
But
and also,
we detect the Dark Templars and stuff. We just basically the API returns you every invisible units, but it doesn't tell you what it is. But as soon as we see one, or we see a Dark Shrine, we just trigger our anti-invisible code. So
magic anti-invisible code. Fair enough.
Yeah, it does stuff.
One other thing that seems to be automatic, there's two things, I guess. One is like an attack range, like the Cyclones, for example, know that they need to get within a certain range, get a lock on, and then they sort of run away. And a lot of the units seem to be aware of their danger radius, which I guess is that influence map you said before, but they also know their own attack radius and their own. Did you have to code specifically to say the Cyclone should get this close, get the lock on, and then run away, or how did you manage that?
Yeah, we have some values that are hard coded, just because sometimes the API can't give us all the information we need. So we know what's the range, the lock-on range of the spell, but we can't know the maximum range. So I need to hard code it so the cyclones can know that they need to stay somewhat close to its enemy to keep the lock-on active.
Right.
And for attack range, we all get that information with the weapons that are linked to the unit types. So we use this information to know where our units should be positioned to be able to attack and take the least damage possible.
So it seems like some of the information you can get from the API, some of it you have to manage yourself. Does that mean whenever there's a new patch to the game, are you making a lot of changes? I mean, I think you guys commented in the last series that the battle cruisers are going to have an issue and you're going to have to modify them. Like, what sort of impacts have you seen so far, and how have you dealt with them?
For the modifications, I can't recall right now, but for the battle cruiser, yeah, we'll have to do some modification because we don't have the channeling time of spells. So there's no way just with the API to know in advance that the spell is not gonna execute right away. So I'll need to figure out when to start the teleportation spell. Because in the previous patch it was instant, so it was pretty easy to code. But now I'll need to check how many enemy units and what's their DPS and choose an appropriate time to start the teleportation spell, since it takes a whole second before it takes off.
Right.
In general, we've been lucky with update patches. It didn't really change that much, like the data that we hard coded. We had to hard code, but like the battle cruiser is one example that we have to adapt. It's just changed so much that we cannot. We have to change the code. And let's say they replace the lock-on for something else. I don't know, on the cyclones. We will have to adapt, but in general, if they change like the Marines attack to give it +1, that's going to be automatic. It's just going to be an amazing buff. They should do it.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that as well with PyC2. Sometimes there's information you can get from the API. Sometimes you've got to code it in. Sometimes it's just unknown, and then they'll release a patch to the API and more information is available, and so you can use it. So I just noticed there, your barracks, you seem to always float the barracks and send it in. There seems to be a strategy to that. Can you explain it?
Yeah, we do it only when we do a proxy build with cyclones, because cyclones are not really good if they are by themselves, because they need to have a unit that gives them vision to keep their range, their superior range, because they don't have a very big vision range by themselves. So the flying barracks can show the top of the ramp units, so the cyclones can still attack the enemy units while being on the low sides of the map. So they are a lot more powerful when they have flying units next to them. So the flying barrack is pretty tank, and we can have it very early on, as opposed to units that would come out of a starport. So we can push our attack a bit faster when using the flying barracks.
Also, an additional bonus that has is some bots just don't understand what's going on and just focus the barrack for no reason and just die because of it.
And I thought that was originally I thought that was the goal. It seemed like when the barracks goes in,
it is not.
All the enemy units just attack that one. And it looks as if it intentionally is pushing forward ahead of your unit in order to sort of take all the fire while your unit's taking out the enemy. But that's just a happy side effect.
Vision. Yeah. Only vision. The rest is bonus.
Yeah. It's a side effect.
That's pretty good. So when do you decide to repair that? Like that barracks there went down, but I have seen you send SCVs to repair sometimes. What's your decision making around repairing buildings or
That's
any
not
units that can be
something we
repaired?
coded.
Right, repair.
Okay.
Yeah,
program both buildings and units.
but it's not for the repair worker. It's usually they wait for a unit to come close to them to repair. But for the flying barracks, it will work only if there's no enemy units close. So if the worker can go repair the barrack because there's no enemy units close, it will do it. But usually the barracks will be in the middle of the fight, so the worker would stay next to the factory and wait till cyclones come to repair it.
Mm-hmm.
Like
the
in
barracks
general,
is a
you
bit too slow for that.
Buildings that are low health, unless they're like important buildings like a bunker, a turret, a planetary fortress or something. But the flying building we rarely repair because of the enemy influence.
Mm-hmm. So that probably explains one of the other things that seems to be somewhat automatic is the battle cruisers, when they get to a certain health level or they know that they're in danger, they seem to shoot out of there. And I'm assuming you send them back home, and then they're safe to be repaired, and then you can bring them back across the map.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have what we call a repair station. We just send units there, and they're being repaired. It's usually a base close by the enemy, but not necessarily like right in their face. And we repair it to full health, then it goes back to fight and just comes back when it's low health.
It's a bit cheaper to keep our units alive and repair them rather than build new units.
Repairing a Terran unit from like 0% HP, but like 1, basically, like a battle cruiser, 1 out of 550, will cost a little, very little less than half the cost of creating a new battle cruiser from scratch. So it's really worth it to repair it. Although you do lose worker time, but it's still very, very worth it.
And during that time, our starport can still create a new battle cruiser and will start to snowball.
Yeah, it helps just getting.
And you can pull the battle cruiser to defend if you need to, and it's there. So even if it gets up to half health, you've still got a battle cruiser that's ready to go at any time versus sitting there building at a starport.
That's something we could do, but they'll stay close to the repair station until they're full health.
So do the army units make any decisions based on the units that are around them? So, here you've got a bunch of cyclones together. Are they going, well, there's 3 of us, there's 5 of them, let's stay together? Or do they just go, well, the nearest one to me is here, I'm just going to go attack that one?
Yeah, that's something I need.
Oh, looks like that might have dropped out there.
All our units are
making
their decisions only by themselves, apart from the combat simulation. Then they consider their surrounding allies. But like for the cyclones, they just go in if there's not too much influence. But when there's a lot of enemy influence, they won't try to go in, even though there are like 10 of them. So I should change the code a bit to consider the ally units for the cyclones, but usually for the combat simulation, it already works pretty well.
Right. Are they focus firing, or they tend to just attack whichever one's closest? Is there a strategy?
There's a calculation that says which unit is the most priority. Basically, if a unit has 1 HP, it's a higher priority target than a unit that's full health. And SCV is slightly higher than other units, stuff like that. So you just know that it's not really focus fire, but if a unit's lower, then you're gonna kill it first. So it also kind of is.
It can make some overkill, but usually since our units are all micromanaged individually, they'll not have their attack weapon ready at the same time. So they won't do too much overkill.
Right. That's what I was thinking. If you have them all attacking the weakest unit nearby, then it's not going to work out that well. But just by chance, they're attacking at different rates, so it kind of works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right. You could, for example, see a very high DPS unit hit a 1 HP unit, while all the around units hit a full health unit because they didn't have the range. It's possible, but it's not likely, so it's fine by us.
Sure. So have you run this bot against itself? Because when I watch it play, I sort of think this bot would be very vulnerable to itself. You know, you guys seem to scout quite well. You put the pressure on early. You micro so well that you don't need as many units early on. And but then it seems like if somebody did the same thing back, then your bot would kind of have a bit of a tougher time.
Yeah, sometimes I test my bot against itself, and usually the one that can kill the first worker usually wins. Just because it has a slight macro advantage.
Right.
But, sometimes it makes it so that there's a very long game at very close, and they both get a lot of flying units, and they don't know when to make the big push, and they just takes half the base, and the other same bot take half the other bases, and can takes a lot of time for a game to finish.
So is that aggressiveness? Is that purely based on the influence maps, or have you got something where you go, I think we're probably going to win it if we push in here? Be more aggressive. You know, is there a decision point there?
Our army units are always told to go attack the enemy, and if they don't attack, it's because there's too much influence for them to move on. So they stand by the enemy bases, and they won't ever go back to our base unless they need to defend against some incoming army.
Right. So that's really interesting, because that seems kind of counter to a lot of what a human would do. A human would just send a bunch of units to a certain location, you know, build up a decent army, and then send it in, rather than, you know, obviously without being able to micro at 90,000 APM, you know, a human can't send those units in and then retrieve them and so on.
Yeah, so our bot is just so annoying for a human because it will constantly attack. But I think in some situations, it's better to keep our units at base and wait until we have enough of them and make a push. But we didn't pinpoint exactly these situations, so we have our units that just always attack.
It's a pretty interesting strategy to think that just that rule of every unit operates independently, attacks all the time, or harasses, or does whatever it can as much, sums up to a very good attack strategy. And then as more units come in, it just sort of increases the power and, you know, keeps pushing forward. I notice that I think in this game particularly, but also just in general, after it pushes with that early harass and a couple of units that is microing, as soon as it gets to the point where it wants to expand and take all the bases, it kind of comes down a little bit. You know, it's diverting all its resources to building those bases. Maybe it gives up, you know, a few units, and maybe it loses some ground. And then once the economy is good again, then it starts to mass up the units. Is that a design thing, or is that just an influence of the fact that we want to take the map here and we're going to strangle all the resources so the enemy can't do anything?
As I said, it's just economy based. So we see that we can expand. There's bases left, so let's take them. Why not? The faster we get them, the more resource we get. Just from the mules itself, it's already worth it. And then we get the gas. We just get so much. So even if we lose like 1 or 2, we just took 7. So it's worth it.
It's an interesting strategy, because you can kind of rely on the micro that's happening along the way you don't need as much army, right? It seems to do quite well with a few units, so it can hold that mid game quite well and allow you to just take over the map. And then we saw with these games here that GensiBot just ran out of resources, couldn't expand, had nothing left, and then, you know, take it over.
I think our strategy is very good for late game, because we'll have a lot more resources than the enemy, but it can be bad in some situation against bots that are good early on. Like some Protoss bot just makes enough Stalker and enough Immortals to contain our first push. And then when they see they have a lot more army than we have, because we took 2 more bases while they are still on 1, and they have a massive army advantage, they just push and finish the game right away. Yeah. So this is our biggest weakness right now, and we're going to try to patch it the best we can in the weeks to come.
So it sounds like potentially the adjustment in strategy might be to maybe not expand so quickly, maybe a little bit more, depending on what's happening, make a decision, a little bit more army or a little bit more fight, and figure out that mid game a bit more.
Yeah, we need to figure out what the enemy is doing, and if we see that it's making too many army units, maybe we should try to expand a little bit less, and maybe try more to defend instead of constantly pushing.
I already know what could fix the issue, so I'm not really concerned about it. I just need to put time and do it.
I think it's quite good that you guys have your bot open sourced. Essentially, it's up there on GitHub for people to see. So even with a bot that people can see at least a certain stage of where the code is at, it's interesting that you can still be so successful. Maybe because there's so much code and it's so confusing, and it's, to decipher it, it seems like even with the recipe, other people have to really play it and figure it out, and then build their own strategies to sort of counter it anyway.
Yeah, our bot is,
you can look through the code and pick a weakness.
Yeah, our bot is open source, so people can see how we make our features and try to implement them themselves also. But I think the most important thing is the bot to be downloadable, so people can test on their machine against it and find what's working against it. So we know faster what's our weaknesses, and know what we should work on a little bit faster than other people that keep their bot private, and they see one day that some strategy is really strong against them and they're not prepared for it. Well, we can know a bit faster, but it also helps people to find solutions to beat our bot.
It sounds kind of counterintuitive that making your bot testable and maybe counterable by some builds is negative, but actually making it public you just see from the ladder or the gains that, oh, this is my weakness. Let's just patch it in, and that's one less weakness. What's the next one?
Yeah, I think that's a really great thing that you guys are doing, open sourcing it and putting it out there. A lot of people would probably feel a little bit, self-conscious about their code, or be worried about somebody having an advantage. But going with the open source, it kind of goes with the open source movement, which, with any security software or those sorts of things, by open sourcing it, you actually make it stronger, because people can find the weaknesses, you can fix the weaknesses, and then you can make it stronger and better, and then they have to find the next one, I guess. So I really like that strategy that you have.
Yeah, I'd like people to just fork our bot and develop new features and help us create more strategies that are strong. But at the moment, there are a few people that try to fork our bot and just push it into the ladder, just a copy. And they're doing it because they want to implement some new features like machine learning in it. But it hasn't been done yet, but I guess it's coming.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting to see if you've got a bunch of micro machine copies on the ladder, and you're having to work around that at some point would be very cool.
Yeah.
So who would you say is your bot's nemesis? I mean, it's hard to say because you're winning everything at the moment, but who's the bot you want to take out?
It's a good question. I think Tier, I don't know if you know Tier. He has on the AI arena ladder, it has a Zorg bot and a Protoss bot, but his Protoss bot is really strong. It also played in the last tournament, the SC2 AI tournament. I specifically put Tier into the other pool because I knew that I stood no chance against it. Tier put a lot of effort to counter our bot, but it still loses to several other bots, so it didn't make it to the semifinals. But when our bot is against tier, it has a really bad time.
Are there any specific races that your bot struggles against, or is there a particular weakness to Zerg or Protoss or Terran, or is it you kind of feel it's strong against everything?
Protoss are overpowered. Nothing more to say.
Fair enough. So, have you thought about building a bot that has another race, or are you happy with Terran?
I thought about going Protoss since it honestly is overpowered compared to Terran and Zerg, but it's just so much effort to start all over again. And then I don't want to give up the Protoss bot, the Terran bot, I mean. So then just twice as much work. So it's not yet anyway. Maybe one day.
Fair enough. It does take a lot of time to build a bot. So, especially if you've been working on it for 2 years, you probably don't want to throw that work away and start again in a hurry. But it seems like potentially you might want to take that challenge on if everybody is copying your bot and, there's just a bunch of micro machines on the ladder. You might want to have a different one.
A Protoss micro machine could be nice to see.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. I mean, even a random bot would be kind of cool if we could, use the same strategies and just build them up for different races.
Yeah, there's not a lot of random bots at the moment, but I think they're really interesting. They can be more powerful than one race bot, but it takes so much effort that they're not there yet.
Like this very small advantage you get is so good.
Do you find it like with your bot, does it need to detect what the enemy race is in order to sort of start making some decisions? Or, I mean, it seems like in the early game, it's just going proxy racks anyway, but
yeah, it detects the enemy race. And one example is on the build selection. It will sometimes do the Proxy Marauders build, but only against Protoss bots, because it's not really that strong against Terran and it's really bad against Zerg. So sometimes against Protoss it does it, but usually we only detect specific unit types and not the race by itself.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Cool. Well, thank you guys very much for coming on and giving us a look into your bot and all the secrets, giving up all the secrets and giving your competitors an insight into what they can do to improve. It's been great to see what it achieves and how it achieves it, and that some of it's by design and some of it's by pure luck. So thank you very much for coming on, and thank you to everyone who helped make this show possible. For those who are viewing, we want to hear your bits of feedback, so please let us know what you liked and what you didn't like, and then we'll see you in the next show.
Thank you.
See ya.
Cheers.